Baton Rouge police tell us that this young man here, Jonathan Scott, died when another man running for deputies crashed into his car. This all started in Livingston Parish. Our Elizabeth Val found out that the man at the center of this case has a very violent criminal history.
We were just actually going to bed in our campers at our yard, and we heard the crash.
After hearing the crushing sound of cars crashing, Tim Ferguson found a dramatic scene on the roadway outside his camper. Ferguson and his co-workers were camping out near Florida Boulevard and Stevendale Road on their way to Texas to help with recovery. A former paramedic, Ferguson saw his help was needed here.
I asked the police officers who was worse and if they needed a medic, so I went over to the young man's car over there in the ditch, and he had some facial trauma and some potential head trauma.
The young man in the ditch was 23-year-old Jonathan Scott. He later died from his injuries. On social media, his grieving family described the Scotlandville High grad as love, laughter, and life, and asked for prayers. According to investigators, a man on the run from Livingston Parish deputies caused the crash.
Speed is a factor in this crash. So you have an innocent bystander that was proceeding to whatever destination he was going and was killed as a result of this vehicle traveling down Florida Boulevard.
The high-speed chase began in Walker. The Livingston Parish Sheriff says narcotics investigators were looking into, quote, illegal activity at a home when they say this man, Reginald Whedon, tried to run over two deputies. Whedon allegedly took off, leading deputies on a chase down Florida Boulevard. According to investigators, the suspect, represented here by the red car, was driving west on Florida. The victim, Scott, represented by the blue car, was driving east. Now, as Scott turned north onto Stevendale Road, that's when investigators say the two cars collided. Court records show 30-year-old Whedon has a long and violent criminal history. He was currently out on bond for drug charges in East Baton Rouge. A 2004 case shows investigators charged Whedon with first-degree murder after he admitted to beating a man to death over a $45 drug debt. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter in that case and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Whedon now faces several new charges in Livingston Parish, and more charges are possible in East Baton Rouge. Elizabeth Vowell, WAFB 9 News.
Elizabeth tells us that she asked for an on-camera interview to ask a few questions to the Livingston Parish Sheriff. The sheriff denied that request.